What are some of those answers that you hear from your residents and from the people that are going through the program and have graduated the program about the best way a friend, a mom, a dad, a brother can help?
It's hard. I think the very best thing somebody can say, a family member can say, I love you. I can see that you're struggling. I don't know how to fix it.
No.
I don't have a 5-step plan, but I'm going to be with you.
No.
I'm going to sit with you. I'm going to walk with you. And we're going to figure this out together when you're ready. And that's the hardest thing. That is the hardest thing, you know, as a parent, as a loved one, to realize that if you want it more than they want it, it's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
And so sometimes there's a long period of time where you have to sit in the mess with somebody. And that's really, really hard. But I think that's the thing that I've learned the most is just simply sometimes our presence and our saying, what do you need? How can I help? But the person who is struggling has got to find their own path. They have to find their own path.
Yeah. Kristin,
hi.
Welcome to Empathy Led. I am so delighted to finally have you on the show.
Thank you for having me. It's I've listened to several of these episodes, and I just love the conversations that you're putting out there in the world. So I'm a big fan.
No. I'm a big fan of yours already. I'm sure you already know that. So where I always love to start is giving our audience a little bit of context about who you are and the path that led you here. And one of the ways I usually do that is, what are some of the key pieces of your life puzzle that, when put together, really enable people to understand who you are and how you arrived in this place in your life?
That's a great question. I think, so the quick bio is I was born in New York, raised in New Jersey, had a great family, a great upbringing. Dad was a lawyer, mom was a teacher. And we were just a family that placed a really, really high value on hard work, education, faith, service, all of those things. So I think, you know, to some extent, there was some sort of destiny that I would end up doing something, some little thing that meant I was trying to make the world a little better. I was a public school kid, came down south to go to college at Davidson, just down the road. I was an English major, got certified to teach public school, did a master's degree up in Middlebury. And I think, you know, the thing, honestly, if there's one thing that was the most formative, kind of landing me in this place where I am today, it was actually a massive failure as a new teacher.
Tell me more.
And it's not a story I told very much when I was young, you know, but you get older and you can just sort of laugh about those things. And, you know, so I was that teacher who came out of, I think, a pretty privileged background. I didn't have a word for it at the time. I didn't understand that's what it was. And I took the first job I was offered right out of college because I was terrified that no one would hire me. I was teaching in a rural school district in North Carolina. And my very first day, I had 5 classes with 30 plus kids per class. And I got to the end of the day and I thought, oh my gosh, I don't even know how I'm going to connect with all these kids, much less learn their name. And I'll never forget, I went to the principal and I said, look, I know I'm the newest teacher in the building. Did I just get all the worst classes, all the biggest classes? You know, there's just no way. And he barely looked up from the papers on his desk. And he said, don't worry, half of them will drop out before Christmas. Second half of the year will be better. And it just stopped me in my tracks. And I thought, that's your answer? Is we're just waiting for these kids to drop out and then we can teach the rest of them. And so I went back, you know, with all the idealism of every young person who's ever watched a great movie about a teacher who wants to change the world. And, you know, they have a couple hard weeks and then it all turns around and they make this life-changing thing. And it just didn't happen that way. You know, I went back to that classroom and I failed and I failed and I failed those kids for a couple months. And at the end of that time, I thought, I have nothing to offer these kids. The things that motivate me, the things that make me tick, are not the things that motivate them. And I just thought, I'm not the right person for this. And so I called up my mom. You know, that's what every self-respecting 22-year-old does when they hit a crisis. I called my mom and crying, and I said, that's it. I'm going to quit and I'm coming home. And she said, well, you know, you remember, we don't quit in this family. And I thought, yeah, I've learned that lesson a couple of times. We don't. And she said, but if you're really determined, I would just ask that you would do one thing before you make that decision. What is it? And she said, you talked so much about a professor at Davidson who was really meaningful to your education. She said, just call Dr. Mitchell and tell her what's going on. And Dr. Mitchell happened to be the chair of the education department at Davidson and was really a mentor for me. And so I called Dr. Mitchell and said, this just isn't for me. I'm sorry. I know you invested a lot of time and energy in my education, but I just can't reach these kids. And I think I'm going to quit. And she said, can you take a couple of sick days? I said, yeah. She said, all right, bring your grade book, your class rosters, the curriculum, every textbook. She said, I'm canceling all my classes, all my meetings, and we are going to hole up in my office until we fix this. And so I, you know, dragged my pitiful butt back to Davidson College, and we holed up in her office for 3 days.
Wow. And
it was really my first lesson in empathy, because what I realized is I went in there trying to give the kids what I thought I would need, and I never took the time to listen long enough and be curious about what they really needed. And so that was a really powerful lesson. And I went back to that job with a whole lot of humility and a whole lot of curiosity. And it was not a perfect year, but I stayed. And I think that experience shaped so much of what would happen next for me. Just this really profound realization at the age of 22 that I did not know it all. And that sometimes the best thing I could do was simply to sit with somebody and listen and maybe try to understand the world as they see it through their lens. Because if I can't do that, I can't, I'm no good to anybody. So I reconnected actually with Dr. Mitchell recently. She's actually still living in the area, and we just had such a great time reconnecting. And I tell that story, and this was, 30 plus years ago now. And she says, I don't remember all the specifics of it. But she said, but that sounds like something I would have done. And I said, yeah, it was.
Dr. Mitchell. Wow,
Yeah,
what a beautiful story. There's so much there to unpack. I think, the couple of things for me that stand out, you say any self-respecting 22-year-old going back and crying to their mom. But for me, when you said that, it spoke more to the relationship that you had with your mom, that you felt that was the first person you thought to call and to confess and to, share. So that was one of those, the first thing. And then your story with Dr. Mitchell just reminded me of the many, many stories that I have with people like Dr. Mitchell, who along the way have stopped everything to help me figure out how to make it to the next phase of my life, my career.
Yeah, I'm such a big fan of saying, none of us get through this life by ourselves. And if we're really, really lucky, we have people along the way who believe in us and take time with us, but also call us out when we need to be called out.
Yeah. So armed with all the humility, armed with all the empathy, armed with a renewed sense of direction, what happens next? You teach how long?
So I bounced around a little bit early in my career geographically, kind of up and down the East Coast, but I had a couple really interesting chapters in my career. So I was an educator for about 8 years, had a brief stint in business and sales, and then landed back in higher education, but on the administrative side as a fundraiser. And so, I've always had this resume that I think doesn't make any sense to me, or I think it doesn't make any sense. And as I get older and I can kind of look back and see the through line there, and I think the through line for me has continued to be just a fascination with people whose stories are different than mine, recognizing that my perspective is not everybody's perspective, and then figuring out how can I listen and understand, and then maybe try to retell those stories and amplify those voices in a way that maybe makes our world just a little bit kinder, for my kids and for my grandkids.
Yeah. So I know you've spent, I don't know exactly how many years, but you spent quite some time in nonprofit now. How long have you been in this nonprofit world?
I've really been in nonprofit work since 2006.
Wow.
So coming up on a good bit. I started as a fundraiser. That was really my trade. And I actually hate that word. It's kind of like, you feel a little like a car salesman when you're being trained as a fundraiser, but really it's a storyteller. I mean, that's what you do. If you tell a story effectively in a way that makes people care about it, then they want to come alongside the mission. That's all it is. So I started as a fundraiser back at Davidson College. I worked at Charlotte Rescue Mission for about a decade after that, both in fundraising and also just on the kind of management nonprofit leadership side. And then landed here at Hope Haven in 2020 in the midst of a pandemic, because I thought, what could be more fun than running a residential community in the middle of a pandemic? And it's been a wild ride for the last couple of years.
There is no doubt in my mind that the leaders and the organizations that survived the pandemic, COVID, are better and stronger for having gone through it. Like in what ways is it true in your case and in the case of this place?
Oh, in so many ways. So on the kind of micro level here at Hope Haven, I came into this place, as a new leader during a time of pretty significant crisis. And I really got to see what people were made of. I got to see this community just pull together, and that's our residents. We're a residential community, our staff. Looking back on it, it's almost surreal. We did not have a guidebook for how to do this.
No one did.
And, all of a sudden we're managing 20, 30, 40 people in quarantine at any given time, delivering meals, delivering medication, trying to figure out how to check on people and make sure they were healthy and okay while, just managing fear, managing illness. Nearly half of our staff got sick with COVID at some point during this, and they just kept showing up. So I think it really, it made me see really quickly like what this community was made of and what was important. I think on a more macro level, what I think is coming out of this time of COVID, I mean, if we have to find a silver lining in any of this, it's that it's really put a conversation about mental health front and center in a way that it just hasn't been. There's still so much stigma around mental health and around addiction. And I hope she doesn't mind me telling the story. Sorry, honey, but I have a daughter who struggled with pretty significant anxiety for the better part of a decade. And she, it was hard for her to admit it. It was hard for her to get help, all of those things. She was ashamed. And at some point, kind of a year or two into the pandemic, I'll never forget, she called me one day and she says, "Mom, guess what? I'm normal."
Oh.
She says, "Everyone has anxiety now. So I just feel so normal."
Oh my goodness.
And I thought, wow, like that's what happens, you know, when we can be honest about what we're feeling, be honest about what we're experiencing, when we can normalize things like mental health, things like addiction, then it enables us to step out and get help. And it enables us to step out in a way that I think gives courage to other people too.
And what about you as a leader? What has this taught you? Just like I'm sure the early lesson in the classroom taught you something about yourself. What have you learned about yourself going through the pandemic?
I don't know yet that I've had the opportunity to completely reflect on that. I think one of the things I'm noticing in myself and maybe in other people here is that we got through the last couple years on adrenaline and caffeine, you know, like just that survival mode where you just do what you have to do and it doesn't matter how many hours you work, it doesn't matter how tired you are, you just do it. And I think what I'm seeing now in myself and I think in some of the other staff members here is this really profound sense of weariness. And yet we're kind of hard on ourselves because we're like, well, the pandemic's over. Why are we tired now? We should have been tired 2 years ago. But I think we couldn't allow ourselves that. And so there's a little bit of this kind of after effect with all of us of maybe a little bit of lingering trauma, a little bit of lingering weariness. I think for sure we've all learned that there's no way any of us do this alone. There's just no way. And so we have an incredible team here, and I think we take turns being strong, you know. And we hope that at least one of us can be strong at any given moment, and we have to roll with it because we all have lives outside of this place, and we've all had personal crises of our own during this. And so just realizing that, you know, if we're a strong team, we can lean on each other and hopefully stay strong as a team, even when individually we just all have different stuff. You know, we don't bring just our work self to work.
Of course.
We got all of it, and people deal with a lot.
Oh, I'm sure. I mean, So we've been talking about Hope Haven for maybe 5 minutes now. So I want us to take a step back.
Sure.
Tell people about this place, the work that you do, your mission, to give them a little bit of understanding of where we are.
So, you know, the official answer is Hope Haven is a residential community for men, women, and families in early recovery from substance use disorder. These are folks who just need a minute to really work on their physical health, their mental health, find living wage jobs, find affordable housing, which we know is a tremendous challenge in this community. What is really, really cool about Hope Haven is people can stay for a couple of months. They can stay for 2 years, you know, so it's really person-centered in terms of figuring out what it is they need to get back on their feet. We're licensed by Department of Health and Human Services as something called a Therapeutic Community, and I didn't even know what that word meant when I took this job. And it's the coolest thing because really what it means is we believe that people get well together, that nothing happens in isolation. And so what we try to create here is this microcosm of the world where people who are in early recovery get to kind of walk it out. You know, they get to solidify their skills in recovery. They get to practice doing life in a place where they can have little failures and they've got peers to support them. They've got staff to support them. So it's a best practice for mental health and substance use. And it's just a really cool way to do that, to say that treatment is not separate from your life, that it all has to be one. I have a really close family member who I love dearly, who's 4 years in recovery. And he always used to say to me, you know, I am awesome at rehab. I am like the poster child at rehab. But then I get out and it's life that messes me up every time. And so that's what's really cool about this place, is it's a place where people have gone through some primary treatment. They've had their 28-day program. They've had their rehab. But now they get to stack that up against life and life always shows up.
Yeah.
You know, a bad day, an annoying roommate, a boss who's unfair, you know, a rough day with your children. And so this is very much a place where life shows up, and then we figure out together how to get through it.
No, I love that. I love that. I mean, I think before even understanding the work that you guys do here, I just naively thought, you know, once people find the courage or the help and the support that they need to go to rehab, and if they successfully graduate, then all is well, you know. But I didn't realize that there was this transitional moment that is so critical to help solidify all the great work and the strides and the progress they've made in rehab, and make sure that they can continue to build on that solid foundation.
I think you're right. And I think we have this, I think we still have this attitude about substance use disorder that it's fundamentally a choice. There's a moral failing. There's a, we like to put people into buckets of, you know, you're successful or you failed. You know, you went to rehab and you're good, or you failed. You relapsed. And it's just not that easy. It's like every other mental health condition, and it's like many physical conditions. It's no different than, you know, heart disease or diabetes, that we can manage it well, but we can't necessarily cure it. And so managing it well is an entire lifestyle. One of our counselors here, Jacob Jenkins, told me years ago, and I never forgot it. He said, sobriety and recovery are two different things.
Tell me more.
And that's really just stayed with me, that you can, in a moment, stop using a substance. And that's one thing, and it's really important. But that next 20 years, 30 years, 40 years of your life in recovery is a really different thing. And that's a whole set of choices that people make on a daily basis to pursue wellness in every area of their life. One of the things I think we're learning more and more about is that in order to maintain a successful life in recovery, people need a couple different things. They need health, they need home, they need purpose, they need community. And those are things we all need. But if you're in recovery, those are really, really critical things. And so just treating an addiction in a vacuum, as if somehow we can just get you to stop using this drug and everything will be good, it's just not that simple. And so it's part, again, of this community approach is really looking holistically at the person and saying, you know, it's one thing to stop using a substance, but it's another thing to learn the skills that are going to take them into the rest of their life, and into a successful and happy life in whatever way they want that to look.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like most people understand, you know, that substance use abuse is a real problem. But I was hoping to hear from you to give us help us understand just the magnitude of the problem and the challenge that you all at Hope Heaven here are trying to help address.
I mean, I think for anybody that reads the headlines, we know this has been a growing problem for a long, long time. The opioid crisis, which obviously predates the pandemic just made all this worse. You know, this is a disease that thrives in isolation. What have we been doing? We've been isolating. And so a lot of the early reports, a lot of the early data from the CDC and from other agencies is showing that we think substance use disorder has possibly doubled in the last couple of years, which really means that we've got now a second pandemic that we've got to get a handle on in our communities. I know that, you know, overdose from fentanyl is now one of the leading causes of death for young people between the ages of 18 and 45. And I have 5 children in that age group. And when I think about that and I picture them and their peers and their significant others and their friends, I just think we got to do something. You know, that's really startling. And And so that's what we try to get a handle on here. I think the hopeful thing, the encouraging thing, is there's a lot of good treatment. The medical community's learned a ton about this. We've got medication-assisted treatment. We've got incredibly effective therapies. So help is available, but 95% of the people that we serve here at Hope Haven don't have any health insurance. And if you don't have health insurance, it's virtually impossible to access good quality mental health care, good quality services for substance use disorder. And so I think in our community, that's really becoming a huge focus, is if you don't have $20,000 to go to rehab, where do you go? How do you do this? And how do you step out of your life, when you need income, when you are struggling to maintain stable housing? What does that look like to really make that commitment to come in and get treatment?
And of course, those things are connected. I mean, if you're struggling with substance use abuse, then you probably don't have a steady job. And if you don't have a steady job, then you definitely don't have health insurance, and you definitely don't have the $20K to go to rehab, and on and on and on and on.
Yeah.
And all those, it's such a vicious cycle that people, and for me, that's the part that I feel you mentioned earlier, this misconception that people can just say no, then just stop. It's just choice. But like, is all these things that are just interconnected and just interlock in a way that just create this almost inescapable web for people, despite the best effort. So we already talked about how what we go through life, it's really, when we survive it, serve as great wisdom for us. So what have you learned from your residents, those that have successfully completed this? How would you learn about like the human spirit?
Oh my gosh. It's the residents that really inspire us every single day. I mean, I can have a bad day here. Trust me. I have days where I'm sitting behind my computer and all I'm doing is, scrambling for money and grants and dealing with, local politics and all of that. And all I need to do is get out of my office and walk across this campus and be inspired by the choices that they're making. I mean, when I talk to our new residents coming into the program, I always tell them this is the hardest, bravest thing you will ever do in your life. You're giving up a lot. You're giving up your freedom. You're kind of stepping out of your life. You're acknowledging that you need help, and it is incredibly difficult. But they're so resilient. I mean, there's so much resiliency. And I think the ones that, I look at our parents. We have so many people here who are mothers and fathers and grandparents. And I think about how hard they fight to keep their family together, and how hard they fight to just try to write a different end to their story so that their kids don't end up right in that same space. We're sitting here almost across from our playground and kids are in school today, but, you can sit on a bench at that playground and really see, okay, these kids maybe, hopefully, are getting a chance at something different than what they've known. And, and parenting is hard. I mean, I was a single mom through a lot of years, and parenting is probably the hardest job I've ever had in my entire life. Sure. And then you think, what does that look like when you're also struggling with poverty, when you're struggling with your own addiction and your mental health, when your kids are in a system that is just so full of inequities and barriers to their success. We don't all have a level playing field in this world. And so I look at those parents and just think they're so courageous. They're fighting so hard for their kids.
Yeah. So how are you applying that lesson that you learned in that classroom about listening and asking questions and really understanding and empathizing? Like how are you applying those lessons here in this role as the CEO of Hope Haven?
I hope it helps me to stay humble and remember that there's more that I don't know than I do know, for sure. And I think, again, all of us as staff are constantly leaning on each other for various bits of expertise and wisdom and things like that. But I think keeping the focus too on the people that we serve. I think it's really easy to fall into this trap of, you know, oh, I know what they need.
Yeah.
You know, I know how to fix this. I know what people need. Oh my gosh, I'm just a chronic fixer. I mean, if you asked my children, they would tell you that. You know, they come with a problem, and I immediately have a 5-step plan for how they can fix their lives. And so often the people that we serve have all the answers. We just need to ask the right questions.
Yeah.
And that's a real shift for I think a lot of us. And it's something we have to be really careful of, is not coming into this saying that we have all the answers for your life if you'll just listen to us. It's very, very much the other way around.
So what are some of those answers that perhaps a family member, a friend who is trying to help someone that they deeply care about, who's going through through this, and they don't know how to help? What are some of those answers that you hear from your residents and from the people that are going through the program and have graduated the program about the best way a friend, a mom, a dad, a brother can help?
It's hard. I think the very best thing somebody can say, a family member can say, I love you. I can see that you're struggling. I don't know how to fix it.
No.
I don't have a 5-step plan, but I'm going to be with you.
No.
I'm going to sit with you. I'm going to walk with you. And we're going to figure this out together when you're ready. And that's the hardest thing. That is the hardest thing, you know, as a parent, as a loved one, to realize that if you want it more than they want it, it's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
And so sometimes there's a long period of time where you have to sit in the mess with somebody. And that's really, really hard. But I think that's the thing that I've learned the most is just simply sometimes our presence and our saying, what do you need? How can I help? But the person who is struggling has got to find their own path. They have to find their own path.
So there's arguably nobody listening to this that doesn't understand just how important the work and the mission that you all do here. But I'm sure people are not breaking down this door, offering you guys resources and the support that you need. So what are some of those challenges and hurdles that you guys face?
I think like any nonprofit, I mean, you, on the one hand, you get to do this really incredible work and be inspired by people every single day who get to change their lives. And on the other hand, you're scrambling for dollars all day, every day. And it's just the nature of this work. And so I think my background as a fundraiser was helpful in that because I just know that's part of it. And so I think that's a constant stressor. And I also think too, in a community like this where we just have so many needs right now. I mean, you know, you look across the community and we've just got a mess on our hands in a whole lot of areas. We have, you know, growing problems of homelessness. We have a serious crisis of affordable housing. We've got a workforce shortage. We've got mental health crises, substance use, an educational system that is just failing our kids. And so there's a lot of noise, you know, and we all have every time I'm in a room full of other nonprofits, I think, man, there's 30 amazing causes around this table. And so even for funders, even for government agencies, you know, how do we even begin to prioritize where that money goes and what helps and what works. And that's hard. You know, I think sometimes when you spend a lot of time on the kind of more political side of it, you know, at the tables in the community where we're trying to make decisions about what to fund and how to go about it. It's easy to get a little cynical sometimes too, because we have a lot of money that we throw at problems, and sometimes it's hard to know that the needle isn't moving in the way that we want it to move. So I think for me, I also have to keep my focus on the individuals who are in front of us. You know, we can't necessarily, we can't always impact change at the community level as quickly as we want to. I hope we're making a contribution there, and it may be something where I don't even see it change in my lifetime. But we hope that we're contributing to that. And then we keep our focus on the individual who's right in front of us. And we say, well, you know what, for that mom and for that kid, this mattered. And that's really the only way I know how to do it.
I'm sure, I think that's the only way to do it. It always feels odd, but it's the reality when you hear that nonprofits are competing, right? Like competing for attention, competing for dollars, competing for all of that. And one of the things that I really love about this place is how you all are always trying to look for ways for all those nonprofits that are competing but really shouldn't, and look for ways to partner and to collaborate and to support each other. And one of the most recent expression of that is the forum. So can you tell us a little bit more about the forum and what the mission of the forum is and what's behind that initiative?
Sure. Well, we're sitting in the building right now. So Hope Haven is located in an old 1970s motel complex on North Tryon. And so we've got a whole bunch of buildings, motel buildings, gathering spaces. It's an 8-acre campus, and we had this great big conference center out back. I love running into folks who've lived in Charlotte a long time and remember coming to business conventions and proms and things like that, you know, back in the day. So this building had kind of been used for all sorts of things and fallen into disrepair. And we were fortunate enough to get a grant from Lowe's. We were part of a Lowe's 100 Hometowns project last year, and they renovated the space. And the idea behind it for us was, you know, we've got a staff of 50 plus people here. We are constantly onboarding, training, equipping, really trying to pour into our staff. And it's expensive and it's time consuming. And the thought occurred to us, well, if we're doing it, guess what? All of our peers at other agencies are doing it as well. And we think we're all doing the same stuff, but we're doing it by ourselves. And so what would it look like if we said, all right, we're going to create a space that everybody can use, and we're going to try to bring in, you know, the best teachers and trainers in the region and in the state that we can find. And we're going to offer training that is useful, affordable, frequent. And we're going to do that together. So we all end up sitting around the tables together. And so it's been a really, really cool thing. We've all had a lot of turnover during COVID. And so, you know, collaboration is such a big word between nonprofits, but I think there's collaboration at a couple of different levels. There's collaboration up here that's, you know, leadership, and we've got a formal memorandum of understanding and a contract, and we work together. But then there's this collaboration on the front lines where, you know, someone walks into an agency in crisis, the caseworker in front of them says, oof, like, we can't help you, but guess what? I know who can. Sit right there. I'm going to make a phone call. And I think a lot of that went away during COVID because we had not been face-to-face. We've had high staff turnover. So one of the things we're really hoping to do is foster that kind of interagency connectivity again. Because as much as I think the system often makes us feel like we're competing with each other for dollars, and I guess to some extent we are, but we're very much in this work together. And people come to all of us with a really complex set of problems. So if we are aware of all of our peers in the field and we know who's doing what, who's uniquely equipped to meet which needs, then I think we all serve people better. So that's been incredible. We've had we've only been open since February. We've had over 40 different agencies participate in trainings here.
It's amazing.
And it's growing and growing. And so we're trying now to spend a lot of time talking with our partner agencies, figuring out what do you need, and then kind of start to calibrate what's the right frequency. So kind of the standard offerings that we have out here are things like trauma-informed care. We want all professionals in these fields to be trained in trauma-informed care, de-escalation techniques, motivational interviewing, mental health first aid. So there's all of this kind of range of conversations that's taking place in here.
Yeah.
And it'll grow, I think, as we have a need to grow. And so as people start to express, hey, we really need this. One of the most interesting things that came out of those conversations was that we did a poll about a year ago of leaders at all the agencies across the city and said, you know, what's your number one need for staff training? And we listed, 10 or 15 different things. And the number one need came back staff self-care. Self-care.
Wow.
Like our staff, they're tired, they're burning out. We need to be able to teach them some really practical strategies for how to manage their own health in the midst of this work. So we've been doing a lot of that. So it's been fun.
That's cool.
It's been really fun.
Yeah.
And I think for us, it's been it's starting to undo some of the isolation we all felt during COVID.
Yeah.
I still get emotional. We had a meeting of a bunch of community partners in here last week, and we were all sitting around in a big square, and I almost started to tear up just thinking like, oh, we're all back. We're together. We're in one room. And we can work together.
Yeah. Yeah. So hope is in the name. What have you learned about the power of hope?
I think when I was younger, I would have answered that question in a really aspirational way.
Yeah.
Like hope is this beautiful, magical thing where we can envision a better world and rainbows and butterflies. And the older I get, the more I realize hope is really gritty. Like hope,
I love that.
it has to have legs. It just has to. Because hope by itself without action and without courage just isn't going to get us anywhere. And that's what we see here. That's what we see.
Yeah. So you mentioned self-care. How do you take care of yourself these days? And for me, like, it's something that you understand intellectually, but nobody really stops and pause and ask. But who takes care of the people? Who takes care of those who are struggling the most in our community? Like who takes care of the social worker and the kid and like all of those people? Right? Like who takes care of you? How do you replenish yourself? How do you fill your cup up?
Well, I mean, because you invited me to be on a podcast, so that means I must know something. I don't. I'm terrible at it. I'm absolutely the worst. So I can tell you some things that I know cognitively, but I'm not always good at putting those in practice. I think it's really difficult for people in this line of work to leave their work at work and not bring it home. I was just talking to a staff member the other day who said, this is the best job she's ever had. She loves being here. But she said, it's too hard. She said, I wake up in the middle of the night thinking, did I make the right decision on that? Did I forget to do that? Did I leave this thing undone? And she said, I've never experienced this kind of stress in my entire career.
Wow.
And she comes out of a corporate background. And so, it is hard. And I think we all know there are things like, meditation and mindfulness, breath work, physical exercise, having hobbies outside of work, setting boundaries. Like we know all of those things. And we can try to teach them to people, but I don't always model it really well. I'm still trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
Very much trying to figure it
No,
out.
I think we all are. We all are. I keep using the word, we understand things intellectually, but then when it comes time to put it in practice, it's just very difficult, and I can only imagine how much harder it is for people in your line of work, the inability to really dissociate what you witness on a day-to-day, and then just when 5 o'clock comes, just forget and leave all of that behind. It's impossible. And it's impossible because it's humanly impossible. But I think it's even more impossible because the people that are attracted by this kind of work naturally are just empathetic and caring and compassionate. And they just can't help but.
It is. And some of our counselors who are clinically trained are actually much better at this than I am, because they've had that training. That's been part of their education, is to learn how to sit one-on-one with somebody and hear about their trauma and not kind of experience it vicariously. And so, I learn a ton from our counselors, honestly. And I think, if I have one thing I've learned is I have to sometimes find ways that I can be 100% present in something away from here. So, whether that's going to play with my grandsons, because you can't be anywhere but there when you're playing with two little ones, or, shutting off email at a particular time of night, saying like, there's really nothing more that I can do here that's going to be productive. And the best thing I can do is be present at home, get a good night's sleep, because it's all still going to be there tomorrow.
So how many grandkids do you have?
So my husband and I are a blended family. So we've got 5 incredible young adults. We now have 7 grandchildren between the two of us. We're soon to be 8. And I think it's a number that's just going to keep growing and growing. So I won't be surprised if we've got, 15 when all is said and done. So it's really just an incredible time of life for us. We're really enjoying it.
Have you been able to reflect on the difference between being a mom and being a grandma?
Oh, being a grandma is 100% better.
How so?
I think as a young mom, and I was pretty young when I had my kids, but, you're tired. You're exhausted, you're dealing with, the lack of sleep and trying to juggle your career and the kids and figuring out if you're doing it all right. And there's a lot of worry that comes with that. And I think as a grandmother, I just get all the good stuff. I keep saying to my daughter, I said, sometimes I feel bad, but I get all the good stuff. I get all the best of what it means to be a parent. And she is very much in that stage where she's tired all the time. She's wondering if she's doing it right. She's trying to figure out, what she wants to do in her life and how motherhood fits into that, like all of those battles that I think we have as parents. So grandparents, we just get all the good stuff.
I'm sure in some ways having kids informed your decision to go into this line of work, to do your little part to make this work better. In what ways do your grandkids fuel and stoke your fire?
One thing is I look at the kind of mom my daughter is, and I think already, I'm like, oh, she's so much better than I ever was. She's an amazing mom, and she's raising these little boys who are so emotionally intelligent, even as little ones. She's so thoughtful in the way that she wants them to be able to name their emotions and experience the world and have empathy and appreciate difference. And so I just love that. I love watching that. But there's a certain amount of pressure, like, man, we got to do better. We got to figure something out, because these little humans are coming next, and we don't want to leave them a mess. We want to leave them something that maybe is a little bit better than what we found. But it's pretty amazing to watch.
Well, of all the people trying to make their little contribution to make this world a better place, you are certainly, especially in our community, a leader. And we are so grateful for the work that you and your staff and all the people in this line of work do. I think it's work that is thankless, is in the shadows, and it's not really something that you hear talked about in the media. Or so I really hope this is a platform not just to put a spotlight on the complexity and the scope of the challenge at hand, but I hope it's also an opportunity for you all to be celebrated for your work, and for us to just thank you for restoring our community. And so this was my opportunity to thank you and thank all the staff at Hope Heaven for the work.
And and I appreciate that. I do. We are not the heroes in this.
Yeah.
The heroes are the people who live here, who are trying to put their lives back together. And so I think it's such a blessing that we get to even be a little part of that, because we see a lot of hard stuff, but we get to also see some amazing stuff. So.
I mean, as a board, I'm fortunate to hear some of those stories, because you're always so thoughtful in making sure that some of the people that successfully went through the program come and talk to us and update us in their life, and share with us the successes and the setbacks at times. And it always fills me with so much hope and so much courage and so much inspiration about whatever hurdles and challenges and that I'm facing. You look at these people and you witness their stories, and you witness their bravery and resiliency, and you see a part of you in them. In that you feel, okay, I can climb any mountain, and it's always so.
Well, that's why you do what you do, right? It's the power of story. And just being a witness to other people's story, we learn something every single time. So I'm really grateful for the way that you serve here as a board member, and you're part of this whole place. The way that you guys support us as staff, the way that you stand behind this work, really makes a difference.
Well, thank you. Thank you for being on the show. This, as expected, has been an amazing conversation.